Hey folks, just wanted to see how you're all doing. Hopefully things are going well. We got the midterm behind us, paper one's behind us, and we're on discussion thread 7. Um, so just I'm kind of musing actually. Um, a thought came to me that I should share with you because as we go through um, each of the modules and we think about critical thinking, ethical frameworks, and how you can use different frameworks to evaluate a potential solution to a dilemma or a problem. Um, you can look at it analytically, like on a spreadsheet, right? You can put your different ethical frameworks, the deontological, the utilitarian, the universalist, the ethical egoist, and you can list your core values on the bottom, and you can, in essence, price out an answer, right? And depending upon the solutions that you get, you say, well, out of the 4 or 5 ethical frameworks I've used, 3 of them say I should take option A. So that's the most ethical. Okay. That's an analytical approach. None of us are going to do that, right? At least not on an Excel spreadsheet, not even in a Word document, right? For sure, not in Word. But what I started thinking was, we do shift from one framework to another. Now, some of you have trouble with core values. They shift too. And look, I'm not a psychiatrist, right? I'm not a therapist. I know people who are, and I think I will talk to them about it. But there's this concept that one of my friends who's a psychiatrist at the State Department, believe it or not, they have psychiatrists that work with the diplomats and the diplomatic security service. Sometimes these folks, like the CIA or DIA, they're asked to do some pretty questionable things, right? I won't get into it. Um, and they suffer from a post traumatic syndrome. What happens when we have one of our core values violated or we breach them ourselves? There's this thinking that there's a moral injury that happens. Your conscience is being injured, like injuring a muscle. We're getting a gut punch on the wrong side of your body, and you got liver damage now or kidney damage, something along those lines. And so some of you shift your core values. Maybe you're doing it to protect yourself from getting pained. I don't know. But what I do know is shifting core values from saying, well, I value honesty, I value integrity, truthfulness. And then on the other hand, saying, well, I've lied or I've cheated, I've committed adultery, I've sinned, or whatever you might say. And you can turn that on and off. Again, that's something that I would think you would need professional counseling for, or at least seek out a mentor where you work. Um, I'll share with you a personal experience I had that kind of tested my ethical framework and actually rocked my core values, and it involved my marriage and my obligation to my elderly mother. You know, when I fell in love with my current wife, my only wife, um, we were very young. My mother lived with me, of course. I say, of course, because my father passed away when I was a kid. We lived in a very rough neighborhood in New Jersey. I was the only white kid in a black neighborhood, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot. And I've seen things on both sides. And this is why I really am thankful that I am a critical thinker. Remember, you know, let us not see each other as black or white, left or right, but as God sees us in his holy sight. I came up with that poem because It ain't cut and dry, folks. You gotta really critically think. So I got married with the understanding. I told my wife, hey, look, my mom, she went through a lot. I don't want to get into it during the video. She suffered the most unimaginable crime that a woman or man, but women in particular, should ever suffer. Not by one man, but by three. I'll never forget that day. And it changed my life. I could tell you personally what happened over the phone, but not on video. But anyway, so my mother sacrificed for me. Went to college, worked my way, married, children. 30 years later into the marriage, my mother's older, right? She needs help. And it was putting a big strain on the family and my wife in particular. I was kind of insensitive in a way to her. And I was going to work, she was working. The girls were they were actually out of the house at the time, my two daughters. But my wife was really suffering. And she and my oldest daughter came home one day and said to me, Dad, Mom can't deal with this anymore. You're going to have to put your mother in a nursing home. Culturally, for Italians, that's a no-no. Plus, I've been in nursing homes, some of the best, supposedly. They're horrible. Forgive me if any of you work in the nursing home industry. I don't mean to demean you, but the industry is pretty bad, at least here in Virginia for sure. And basically, I was given an ultimatum by my wife and my daughter. You either put your mother in one of those nursing homes or Mom is leaving. I had no time to work on what an ethical framework was. I don't even know what framework I might have used, but there was a core value. Actually, a couple. The one was love. I love both women almost equally, probably equally. What my wife's done for me all these years, no woman would have done. All right? She took care of my mother, raised my daughters, everything. Made me a better man. But at this moment, when they gave me this ultimatum, my world was rocked. So, love, how do I choose between two people who I love? One who's given me life from the womb, and one who's taken my life to the tomb. How do I choose? That core value that came up was the vow my wife made to me at the altar when we got married. When I had told her before we were married, my mother and I are a package deal. If you marry me, don't ever come between my mom and me. My wife said, that's okay. I can deal with that, she said. Now again, she was 21, I was 20. We're like young and stupid, right? Like some of you, right? Hopefully you're not old and stupid, but so at that moment, I'll never forget, I was standing in the foyer. My wife's kind of like just grayed out. My daughter's angry at me that I put my mother over my daughter, over my wife. And all of a sudden, the deciding factor of, wait a minute, there was transparency and honesty on my part, and you agreed. And now you're backing out of that agreement. I just pointed to the door. I said, then you can leave. You can go. Because she's staying. They were shocked. They left. I was beaten down. Beaten down. This is during the time too I was having trouble on one of my jobs and I started drinking. But when you know it, a little while later, I get a phone call from my wife. She says, Dom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I put you through this. I'm just having a hard time with all that's going on. And I said, honey, I know. My wife came back home and we've been together, of course, ever since. We'll be celebrating 44 years of marriage. And all I want to say is everything we do in this class, you've got to identify your core value. And unless you're under pressure and you're tested, you're not going to know. I'm trying to get you to see the core values are important. And I don't know why some of you can turn them on and turn them off. That is beyond me. And that's where I think counseling therapy might help. Maybe help me understand too. So I will talk to my psychiatrist friend from the State Department about this. Moral injury, when you violate those core values of love, transparency, honesty, it can rock your world, man. The way you protect yourself is by knowing what those core values are and staying true to them and not allowing an ethical framework to turn them on and off. Because then what are you? You're empty inside. You're a shell. You know? So I share this with you in a very authentic way. It's the first time I've ever done it in 5 years. But I just felt I had to tell you my story and to tell you that when it came to love, how do you decide between two people? You know, your answer will be different than mine. But understand those core values. Understand you're dealing with people. Lying, stealing, cheating, obfuscation, manipulation. I don't care who you're doing it to. It's going to catch up to you. It's going to eat at you at the end, and it undermines your relationships. You want to be tight with people? You got to be right with people. And you're not right when you're putting on a facade and you're faking it to make it. It's not going to be. You're not going to succeed in your relationships. Yeah, you'll go from one job to another, but sooner or later you're going to burn out. And people are going to know you, and you'll have a reputation. So anyway, I just leave you with these thoughts tonight. It's Saturday. Make sure you got somebody to love, and make sure that you love people, and make sure that you're honest with them and truthful, because if you're not really loving and you're not growing. All right. So what relevance does this have to module 7? You figure it out. Okay. Thank you for hanging in the class so far. I think we've only had one student so far drop out um, from the paper 1 experience. So we'll talk to you later. Take it easy.